6 p.m. in Marwa in the Fana region of Cameroon. Same time right here in Akwa. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television. First, our major stories. 17 cholera cases have been detected within a space of 1 week in Marwa 1 and 2 subdivisions in the Fana region of Cameroon. The epidemic is fast spreading due to the deteriorating living conditions of the population, aggravated by the recent floods that hit the area. We will tell you how the situation is currently being managed by health personnel and government authorities of the area. Away from that, we'll tell you how the Secretary of State of the Minister of Defense in charge of the National Gendarmerie, Etoga Galax Yves Landry, calls on his collaborators to put an end to what he qualifies as abusive detention in gendarmerie units. In a correspondence addressed to his collaborators in the 10 regions of Cameroon, the gendarmerie boss warned of sanctions that await security officials who are violating the law. The call comes after civil human rights advocates have been denouncing several cases of unjust arrest and detention in Cameroon. Those are major stories. Stay with us for details and more. Just joining us, then know you are watching the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television, and for representation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. We begin this newscast with our health page. The population of the Fana region, particularly Marwa, have been urged to respect barrier measures. The call from the Ministry of Public Health comes after 17 confirmed cases of cholera were reported in Marwa 2 and 3 health districts. We have details with Luciliengo.
17 confirmed cases of cholera have been reported in Marwa in the Far North region. These new cases comes a week after 2 cases had been declared in the Marwa 2 and 3 health districts.
Vendredi passé, 8 Novembre.
Dr. Maurice Janava, head of the Marwa 3 health district, says the patients present symptoms like severe diarrhea, vomiting and dehydration. According to him, these patients were immediately confined
Correctement en charge selon le protocole.
To prevent the disease from spreading further. The senior divisional officer of Diamari, Jean-Marc Baga, over the weekend visited markets, travel agencies, health centers to sensitize the population with respect to barrier measures.
Nous devons donc sensibiliser les populations pour qu'ils commencent à prendre des mesures barrières pour éviter de contracter la maladie.
The inhabitants, especially those in Digewo, were urged to desist from dumping waste in the neighborhood.
Personne ne dépose plus les ordures ici.
Also, Jean-Marc Baga issued a stern warning to vendors of fruits and vegetables, banning them from selling near trash cans. We need to keep our environment clean. What we eat should not be placed on the floor or exposed to flies. Aside barrier measures implemented, health personnel have been trained on the manifestations of cholera and first aid measures.
Nous avons également le personnel qui a été déjà briefé sur les signes en faveur du choléra.
Meantime, the 17 confirmed cases are admitted at the Marwa 2 and 3 health district hospitals.
Luciliengo reporting there. Away from that, a vast network of cyber fraudsters has been dismantled by police elements in the Adamawa region. The operation permitted the release of nearly 60 young girls and boys recruited in civil cities to work for the clandestine training center. Sericha Kutio reports on their modus operandi.
A room in Bamyanga, a neighborhood in the Adamawa region, several youths are still gathered on mattresses when the authorities arrive on the scene. Here is one of the representations of the supposed training center, for which each of them paid an amount of 650,000 francs, representing a training cost. I came here for an interview and I was asked to pay 650,000 francs. After, I had to sell a product and have bonuses. They are in total 7 young people, thus 19 girls aged between 15 and 39-year-old, found in this clandestine training center. The victims, recruited from several regions, were promised jobs in structures based in Malaysia and West Africa by the promoters. However, the reality was quite different. We all represent Press International Company in Malaysia, and we are remunerated according to our sales. The parents in shock only have their eyes to cry. My child had her exam, and since I did not have money to send her abroad, I instead left her here. So she came telling me that she had an opportunity where she was to give 650,000 francs. I sold my 2 motorbikes to help her. Here she is now. I feel very sad. This vast network of fraud was dismantled by the judicial police.
Nous avons pu démanteler ces centres, ces faux centres de formation de jeunes qui, après recrutement moyennant le versement d'une somme de 650 000 par enfant.
For the governor of the Adamawa region, it is time to raise awareness about these training courses that are proliferating on social networks and whose victims are counted in large number.
We have discovered that the center is not official. It's a fraudulent space. So we have decided to step in and to make the children to come here for us to have information from them.
While investigations continue, these children were transported to the Gaoundere Women and Family Promotion Center, where they will be waiting their family members.
Now to education, we now present to you Government High School Otele in the Central Region, the public school that got the mayor of Gumu calling on the Minister of Secondary Education, Professor Pauline Alova-Lyonga, to look into educational structures of secondary schools in her area of command. Our reporters were at Government High School Otele to understand whether the worries of the mayor of Gumu, Jean-Baptiste Atemenge, were valid. Annabella tells us more.
Government Secondary School Otele in the Mefu and Akono division of the Central Region. This is the educational institution which got the mayor of Ngumu on his nerves some days back. Jean-Baptiste Atemenge wondered aloud why is the secondary education sector in Cameroon regressing, questioning the capabilities of the Minister of Secondary Education.
Le maire a tout dit. Le maire a tout dit. Nous n'avons rien à dire. On va accuser. Le maire a tout dit.
His worries can be described as valid considering the state of the public secondary school in Otele.
Vous allez voir, les salles de classe sont abandonnées. Vous me regardez comment c'est ouvert.
The roof of the school is falling off, and a few people we met in Otele told us that the students study on wet benches and wet or muddy floors whenever it rains.
Si vous entrez dans les salles de classe, vous regardez les salles de classe, il chante même la pluie. Quand il pleut.
Amugu Foda Bena tells us his father gave the land on which Lycée d'Otele was built.
C'est mon papa qui est le propriétaire, celui qui a donné le site pour le lycée.
Besides efforts of elite, the government does very little to rehabilitate the classrooms.
Voyons les établissements privés, comment c'est bien conçu, c'est bien structuré. Mais nous sommes surpris que l'État.
Atejo Apollinaire, a native of Otele in his part, says he has his children at Lycée d'Otele.
Je suis natif d'ici. Mes enfants fréquentent même ici.
It feels bad to see our children study in such classrooms, he said.
C'est pénible pour nous, surtout les parents d'élèves.
Adding that it's a public school, but only PTA is helping to keep up the structure. The worries expressed by the mayor from Gumu pushed Minister Alova-Lyonga to explain that in the over 500 billion francs CFE allocated for secondary schools in Cameroon, over 80% of that amount is used to take care of the teaching staff, and another huge chunk of the amount to rehabilitate schools burnt down in other countries.
Now to our major lead story. Police custody and abusive detention in Gendarmerie unit in Cameroon. The Secretary of State of Defense in charge of the National Gendarmerie has called for a return to order. In a correspondence addressed to his collaborators in the 10 regions of Cameroon, the Gendarmerie boss warns of sanctions against security officials violating the law. We have details with Fomi Armstrong Sanda.
Message addressed to all commanders of the 10 Gendarmerie legions in Cameroon. The Secretary of State for Defense in charge of the National Gendarmerie launched an urgent appeal to the agents of the National Gendarmerie to put an end to abusive police custody and lengthy detentions. Considering repeated reports of this practice in Gendarmerie units in Cameroon, the Secretary of State deplores the situation and recalls in his press release that any measure depriving liberty must be governed by legal and regulatory text specifying its duration and methods of execution.
La garde à vue comme mesure privative de liberté a été formelle.
In line with the declaration of the gendarmerie boss, Maître Victor Siwe, a jury says custody is regulated by Article 119/2 of the Cameroon Criminal Procedure Code. Considering the manifested impunity around this practice and the fear that grips Cameroonians at the sight of a uniform officer, the gendarmerie boss made clear recommendations. He called for a strict compliance with the provisions governing police custody under penalty of disciplinary sanctions and legal proceedings. In addition, Galax Yves Etoga is calling for a rigorous monitoring of investigations carried out in gendarmerie units. Each commander will have to report weekly on the status of persons held in police custody in their unit. This declaration thus constitutes a significant step in the process of reforming the National Gendarmerie and demonstrates a real political will to respond to growing expectations in terms of transparency and justice. Cameroon and Cameroonians are yet to settle from the shock created after the release of the video with musician Longe Longe badly tortured in detention by security officials.
Out of Cameroon, at least 13 people are known to have died, while 84 so far been brought out alive from a debris of a 5-story building that collapsed in Dar es Salaam, that is in Tanzania. Meantime, provisional results of the referendum in Gabon show an overwhelming vote in favor of the amendment of the country's constitution. Details of these stories and more with Babila Jonathan.
Rescue teams in Tanzania say they have managed to establish contact with people who are still trapped a day after a 4-story building collapsed in the country's biggest city, Dar es Salaam. They are managing to send them supplies of water, glucose and oxygen through small gaps in the debris. Tapping sounds have been heard from inside the building in the city's busy Kariakou market area. According to the latest figures from President Samia Suluhu Hassan, 13 people are known to have died, while 84 others have so far been brought out alive. Gabon's military authorities say an overwhelming majority of citizens have voted for a new constitution following last year's coup. Provisional results showed 92% of voters backed the new constitution, according to the country's electoral body. The outcome set the stage for a transition to civilian rule, although critics say it is designed to allow coup leader Brice Oligui Nguema to remain in power.
Now we talk sport. Despite the holding of the Ordinary General Assembly meeting of the Cameroon Football Federation FECAFOOT over the weekend, the question on when will football leagues resume activities still looms in the air. The General Assembly that was supposed to clear the air on when the championship was to begin rather dismissed the National Football Trade Union SINAFOC that often pleaded for the respect of the rights of these players. We have details with our sportsman, Smart Chikangebro.
When will the Elite 1, 2 and even the Women's First Division Championship kick off? It is one of the main questions asked by all after the General Assembly meeting of FECAFOOT that took place over the weekend. Our leagues will resume in the weeks ahead. We invite you all to bring in your contributions for us to have the best championship ever in Africa during this sports season.
Lors de cette saison.
For Samuel Eto'o, the competition will start soon without a fixed date, but in the corridors of football, sources say December 8th, 2024, the Elite 1 will kick off and December 14, Elite 2 Championship will resume.
Nous allons reprendre les chemins, les stades.
We shall descend to the pitch in the second week of December. The date isn't known yet, but after discussions amongst us, the club presidents and FECAFOOT's president, the weekend of 6 to 7 December, we start up with the Elite 1, and 1 week after, the Elite 2 will begin.
La Ligue 1, et une semaine après, nous allons commencer avec la Ligue 2.
A tentative plan for the kickoff was presented to the members of the General Assembly meeting, but going through it, none talked about the start of the championship, of which Samuel Eto'o Tofis says peace has returned between Fecafoot and the House in charge of taking care of sport infrastructures in the country to enable them use the different stages in the nation.
Je remercie aussi l'ONIES.
I would like to thank ONIES for sending us the different bills. We had requested to have the bills for a year so that there will be no misunderstanding between us, and we shall go ahead to pay the bills for matches to be played in good stadia.
Au paiement, enfin, que le football se joue dans les stades.
While waiting to have a clear picture about the start date of the Elite 1 and 2 leagues, the AG saw the removal of the National Footballer Trade Union, known as Sinafoc, and they brought in NFC, which now serves as players' representative at the Fecafoot General Assembly meetings in future.
That sports element done by Smart Chikangable ends this first part of the news. Talking Point is up next. My guest tonight is Roland Ojong Ashu. He is a human rights advocate, and as we earlier saw in the reports done by Fomi Armstrong Sanda, the gendarme voice was denouncing several acts of violence or arbitrary arrest meted on some Cameroonians. It should be noted that several human rights advocates have been clamoring that such acts should be ended or should be brought to an end. Now he comes back to it. Good evening, Roland Ashu. It's a pleasure to have you on Talking Point tonight.
Good evening, Madam Immaculate. It's a pleasure. I always love to be like Equinoxe.
We both watched the reports done by Fomi Armstrong Sanda, but before coming to that, we'd like to know from you, what's the difference between pre-trial detention and custody?
Pre-trial detention, as the name goes, for a simple man to understand, is to mean that the person is detained awaiting trial. They call it pre-trial detention. It means that the person is still presumed innocent. He has not yet been tried. He is awaiting trial. They call pre-trial detention. Like maybe somebody is arrested and sent to new bail, pending trial, pending judgment. They consider as pre-trial detention. So a pre-trial detention is a period where somebody is expected to be tried. It's called pre-trial detention. Custody. It is when the examining magistrate, as per section 221 of the Penal Code, the examiner may decide to put somebody in custody so as to get evidence and information about that person. Sometimes it might be for security reasons. It's called custody. And the custody period varies. We have simple offenses, which can just be minimum of 6 months. Misdemeanors can be an extension to 6 months, and felonies can be extension to 1 year, depend on the case. That is the custody, where the examining magistrate needs to get more information about the person or what has to be done in the case. So those are the two differences. To know, pre-trial is the person expecting to be tried but is detained. Then custody is when the examining magistrate decides to put the person in custody, pending the real substance of the case.
Barrister Roland Ashu, what does the Cameroon Penal Code say as far as pre-trial detention is concerned?
Perfect. The Cameroon Penal Code on the issue of pre-trial detention is working in conjunction with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is enshrined in the preamble of the Cameroon Constitution. Section 11 of that Universal Declaration talks about the rights to a fair trial, a fair right. And there are very, very important points to note. There are 6 important points to note. First is the presumption of innocence. Secondly, time limit. What does the time limit talk about? Thirdly, the right to the trial. Another one is respect of the dignity of the person held under custody. Another one is prohibitions of torture, like what is happening at the torture persons. That must be prohibited. Another one is fair trial. It must be done in open court. We also have what called protections of measures, because when it involves juveniles, which are children, and women, in that perspective, protective measures must be applied to make sure it's done in a way that the individual or the persons are being protected. And the last thing is medical examinations. So the Cameroonian Penal Code based on the information, based on the rights enshrined in the Constitution of Cameroon, which is a carry-out presumes, because Cameroon does not work in isolations. All rules and regulations in the Cameroon Penal Code or the Cameroon constitutions are linked to international human rights declarations or international human rights standards. Means that for a pre-trial detention to go on very well, there are some rules and regulations that must be respected. The law says that we assume that the person is innocent. So at that moment, that one must be respected. As I've said again, the right of the trier, the person must be tried, and a right to a counsel during the period of pre-trial detention. The person has a right to have all those persons beside him. The person also has the right to his dignity. The fact that he's under pre-trial detention doesn't mean that he can't be in any way maltreated. His dignity and his right as an individual must be respected. We also have issue of fair trial. During that period, he must have fair trial, and he must have those prohibition measures of make sure protect the individual personality and the rest. And that is enshrined in section 221, sub 1.
Talking about the laws you just mentioned, are they respected in this country?
I can tell you with all due respect that the level of impunity in the abuse of power is getting skyrocketing every day. And I will want to insist that the commandants of the various gendarmeries and the commissioners of the various gendarmeries have a lot of duty of protections of the rights of individuals. Somebody being arrested, they abuse the right of the citizens by refusing the citizens to have access to their lawyers. This is something which we should insist and talk about. Besides that, the use of extortion in the name of money collected, we don't know where the money goes to. Because there's no part in the code that says that you must drop some amount of money before you go out of some jail. There's no way. The law requires caution, security or caution, a guarantee. That guarantee based on the accusation against the person. Security means that the person must bring somebody, a collaborator to bring somebody so that if I'm not there, this person will represent me or the person will bring me as a guarantee. But the extortions are becoming alarming. And that's why I applaud the efforts of the Secretary of State in the Ministry of Defense in January, who just brought a communique wherein he insisted, he was very firm, that all gendarmes who carry on arbitrary arrests and detentions should be penalized. And so we call on citizens to open up and come up to denounce all acts of illegal arrests. I have had incidents, we had incidents here in Douala, which I personally have written about some incidents. I'm not going far because I'm a human rights activist. I've written against some gendarmes, some police who take upon themselves to abuse the rights of citizens, all in the name of trying to extort money or extort goods. But we believe that Cameroon is a state of law and the rule of law will prevail.
Now, this particular question I'm going to be asking you, a lot of Cameroonians are kind of ignorant about it. For someone who has been arrested and kept either in a gendarmerie brigade or a police station, according to the law, how long are they expected to stay there?
The law gives the judicial police officer who have arrested an individual have a minimum of 24 hours, a maximum of 40 hours renewable once, which is a maximum of 6 days. But what I mean that the minimum is 3 days, but should in case the police officer want to extend the days, he or she has a right to get the attention of the State Council for a renewal of an extra 3 days, and that's the law.
Of Etoga Galax Yves Landry, who is the Secretary of State to the Minister of Defense in charge of National Gendarmerie, who called on his collaborators to put an end to arbitrary arrest and detention. Are you convinced that his outing may change how things are done in this country?
To an extent, I will want to say that I appreciate the efforts of the bar, the Cameroon Bar Association, through the efforts of the president of the bar, Barrister Mba, Eric Mba, who initiated some recalls, and that called the attention of the Secretary of State. It is not left for the Secretary of State to make sure that whatever is written comes to reality, but we as lawyers must denounce that. We are the ones to inform the citizens that they have a right at any moment to complain for any act of illegal detention or extortion from them, from any officer of the police or gendarme. So he must have brought in that law, but to an extent, I applaud that effort. It is now left for the Cameroonians to be aware that at any moment where they are being arrested illegally or they are being detained illegally, they have a right to complain. They have a right, and they should be aware that any illegal detention counts for compensation. That section is section 276 of the Penal Code, of the Criminal Procedure Code. It emphasizes clearly that anyone who has been illegally detained must involve detention, must get compensation, and that compensation can be done by suing. There's a special branch, the Supreme Court, where you can sue for a compensation. So if that communique has come from the Secretary of State, let the gendarme be watched and be aware that some of them will be held personally liable, because at the end of the day, when the states find out that a gendarmerie officer or a police officer abuses the rights by illegally detaining somebody, and the person complains to the Supreme Court Commission on compensation, and the state pays that person, the gendarme or the police should know that he or she will be held liable to recover, to pay that money. And that is what many of them seem not to understand. So I call the attention of the population to be aware that if you have been arrested illegally, detained illegally, be watch. Make sure you go after finishing maybe 2-5 days detention, and you know that you were abusively detained, go out and report. Meet a lawyer who writes to the various authorities, and that gendarmerie, that gendarme personnel who have done that will be held accountable. Some of them need to be, their uniform needs to be removed and they go back home for what they are doing, because they are abusing the rights of the citizens. And that sometimes they say is the person of the public. I always say it's not person of the public, because you have sent them there to work, and the authorities are aware. And that is why I want to recall that the commandants of these gendarmes, of these various gendarmeries, have a duty, because it is their element that are acting. Imagine somebody comes to gendarmerie, pick up somebody, goes to somebody's house, pick up somebody without a convocation, without anything, because the person who have complained is a brother or a sister, and detain somebody and extort money from the person. And the commandant, after complaint, commandant doesn't see it. Why is that he must call attention of the person that this is what some of us wrote so many letters. I wrote to Secretary of State in many occasions. Yeah, like some gendarmes in Douala here. I cannot call names, but I've written, and I'm sure those letters have gone to Secretary of State, and he must have seen that those letters have recalled his attention that a lot of illegality is taking place. And so I applaud that effort, and I believe whatever he have put in place will going to happen. We make sure we follow up for the execution. Thank you.
Now, talking about these illegalities in a deeper sense, let's look at the case of hundreds of detainees of the Anglophone crisis who are languishing in detention centers. According to some human rights defenders, most of those arrested have been there for over 5 years and have not been tried. As a legal mind, how will you describe the justice system of this nation?
As a legal mind, I should say the justice of the state, to an extent they are trying, and to an extent they're not trying their best, because in any good crew of vegetables, there must be bad vegetables in that crew. To say that totally not trying would be an overstatement, but to make it weigh vis-a-vis within a minimum of equilibrium, then that would be correct. Because, but for those who have been arrested and detained and have been there for 5 years, I don't think it is correct, because I'm not sure that people who have been there for 5 years would have been tried. But if they are there, then they should bring the name out, and for us to follow up as human rights activists, it's our duty to expose those persons and make sure that they are tried as per the laws. Because for someone to be in detention for 5 years, it is exaggerated, it's abusive. In fact, it's against the United Nations Human Rights Declaration, wherein the freedom of free trial, the freedom for justice on anybody, human rights guarantees and all principles against that person. So it is important if such a person is still in detention, because I knew there was some group of persons who, due to the so-called crisis, the Anglophone crisis, they were not very happy they have been tried. I don't have any idea of anyone per now at this moment that have not been tried. But if that is the case, I called such a person to come up, because it's against the law. And this country, we believe that it's a country that operates the rule of law.
Thank you, Roland Ojong, for accepting my invitation.
much, Madam Immaculate. It's a pleasure to always be there. It's my pleasure to always be there, and I would like to wish my people who are watching at me the best whatever they can. You know, I have failed to understand. I tell you last time that my village Kimbo has always been a subject of interest, because the first strike of this crisis started in my village Kimbo, and fortunately we were trying to see that things go by the way it's going to, because the government is to an extent the government will succumb and come to the help of the people of that village to see that peace is restored in that place, and I believe we're going to be. Thank you very much, Madam Immaculate. Thanks to the spectaculars and televiewers. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now let's take this news streaming in right now into our studio. Reverend Mickey Hans has been elected as the 7th moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon. He was elected this Monday during the 2024 Synod of Assurance. Meantime, Ayuk Solomon is a new Synod clerk of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon. That's it for this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your keen attention. Coming up next in some few minutes, Equinoxe Soir with Serge Alengotu. See you tomorrow, same time, God willing. Bye-bye for now.